So, and then because of the systematic discrimination that exists, Palestinian citizens of Israel cannot get the same jobs because they don't go to the army, whole sectors of the economy are closed off, and so on. So the educational disparities are very, very great, and as in all countries, the educational system is a major route of political indoctrination. I mean, when you go to school in this country and they start teaching you civics, it's a form of indoctrination because they teach you some things and not others. Well, that's also true here, but the indoctrination takes a certain form of legitimizing Israel as a Zionist state, erasing and effacing Palestinian history, and so on. So there's a vast range of experiences, but again, the disparities show at pretty much every level.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So you've talked a lot about the difference in the national narrative, while the founding national narrative. While in America, our social reality might not always represent our values, we have enshrined in founding documents and in founding principles this notion of complete egalitarianism, while in a founding principle of Israel is this exclusionary state. So my question is twofold. One, I want to know, to what extent within Israel do you see that legally enforced? Like within Arab Israelis, how are they considered second-class citizens in the letter of the law? And also, to what extent do you see that founding principle as something that might be flexible within an Israeli democracy, or is that something that's going to be rigidly adhered to throughout the existence of the State of Israel?
I think that as far as Palestinian citizens of Israel is concerned, that the discrimination and the second-class status is far beyond what's in the law. In other words, it's social, it's economic, it's political, it's cultural, it's spatial discrimination, as well as legal discrimination. And so, there's a very good recent book that has come out by Ben White. It's called Palestinians in Israel. I'll just write Ben White up here so you'll remember. And that's a very good, not a long book, but a very comprehensive one that goes into this in detail. But let me give you a few examples to illustrate it. I mentioned the higher education. So one of and how these things tie together. Now, since 1948, Israel has built about more than 800 new settlements or towns for Jews. There's very clear spatial and residential segregation. So more than 800 towns or settlements for Jews. I mentioned earlier that the 150,000 Palestinians left behind in Israel have grown to 1.5 million over the past 63 years through natural increase. Does anyone know how many new towns and villages Israel has allowed the Palestinian population within Israel to build as it has grown tenfold?
-4.
Sorry?
Minus some number.
Yeah, negative.
Well, new ones. Zero is the correct answer. 0. So with the exception of as Israel is ethnically cleansing Bedouins from the Natab, from the Negev, it has forced some of them to settle in towns against their will as it's taken their land. But excluding that, it's 0 in terms of official new towns that have been built. So what happens as the population grows is Palestinians have to live somewhere. So they go to where the houses are. And one of the things we've seen increasingly in recent years is Israeli rabbis. And I'm not talking about a fringe phenomenon where I'm taking 1 or 2 cases and blowing it up out of proportion to make a point. We're talking about the regular phenomenon of hundreds of rabbis in Israel issuing religious decrees saying that it is forbidden for Jews to rent homes to Arabs. And last year, early last year, you may remember, I have it here somewhere. Here it is. There was a ruling by the chief rabbi of Safad, Shmuel Eliyahu, signed by 17 other Arabs, 17 other rabbis in the city of Safad, telling Jewish residents not to sell or rent properties to members of the country's Palestinian Arab minority. And following this decree, there were actually a number of violent attacks on Arab students who had rented homes in the city because they were attending the local college. And similar edicts have been issued in towns including Tel Aviv, Bnei Brak, and other cities. There was even one town where the mayor set up a hotline for citizens to report anyone who rented a home to an Arab. So that's not something that's in the law, but it's widespread. And what's interesting is that those rabbis, hundreds of them who signed onto one of these statements, their salaries are paid by the state of Israel. These are state-funded municipal rabbis. You don't have separation between religion and state. So that's one example. Another legal stricture, which I think is particularly offensive, is the citizenship law that was amended in 2004. Now, in this country, if you are a man and meet the woman of your dreams, or you're a woman and meet the man of your dreams, it doesn't work if you're the man, and a man you meet the man of your dreams, or a woman you meet the woman. At this point in the law, it's only opposite genders. And that person is from outside the United States, and you get married, your spouse can come and live with you in the United States. You have to follow the procedures, and then after 3 years of permanent residency, they can get citizenship and so on. And the thing is, it doesn't matter where your spouse comes from. They can be from Iran, they can be from Korea, they can be from Germany. The law is the same. Well, in 2004, Israel amended its law so that citizens of Israel who marry a spouse from the occupied Palestinian territories or from surrounding Arab countries cannot bring that spouse to live with them in Israel. And of course, they initially used the excuse of security, but there was no basis for this in any security. There had been something like 135,000 such marriages over a certain period that were documented, and no case of any security breach by a spouse coming to the country. And the Israeli Prime Minister at the time, Ariel Sharon, said, openly, I have the quote in my book, let's not hide behind security, there is a need for a Jewish state. In other words, this was about not just potentially getting rid of the, if you want to marry that person, that's your problem, but you go live with them in the West Bank, or you go and live with them in Syria, it's not our problem. So you get rid, one fewer Arab, but also the future investment is you don't have all those children who might be born from those marriages. So this is an explicitly racist law, whose purpose is demographic manipulation, reducing the Palestinian population in order to favor the Jewish population. And it I think, can really only be likened to the kinds of anti-miscegenation laws or marriage restrictions that existed in apartheid South Africa or in Virginia in this country. And of course, the discrimination is that, it applies to all Israeli citizens, but who really does it affect? There are some cases of Israeli Jews marrying Palestinians. That happens, but it's pretty rare. It's really about Palestinian citizens of Israel marrying other Palestinians and bringing them to live in their country. So those are two examples in terms of housing and in terms of marriage where you can see the discrimination. But it's also in terms of the economy. So, for example, Palestinians don't serve in the Israeli army, but many jobs will advertise, many job advertisements, which are nothing to do really with it, will say, you know, army service required. But that's a code for saying Arabs need not apply, basically. Then you have, in recent years, all these laws that are either being proposed or passed. You have a law that now makes it illegal, effectively, to commemorate the Nakba, to commemorate the 1948 expulsion and flight of Palestinians. That law was passed last year. Now, I would like, this is not unique to Israel, I think we have something very similar going on in this country in Arizona, where ethnic studies and Mexican-American studies have effectively been outlawed. Now, you know, basically, in Tucson, Arizona, this school year, the past few months, they've had to remove books by a number of authors from the schools and to ban classes on Mexican-American history. This is all happening in the United States, but it comes from a very similar settler mentality, that we have to suppress the narrative of the indigenous people in case they come back and claim their rights and their history. Did you want to follow up?
Just as a follow-up, but it seems to me the big difference is that in America we at least have, as you put it yourself,
correct. No, I agree with you. You're right.
Government accountable. And do you see that as entirely absent in Israel? And if so, if it's entirely absent now, within the legal framework that's been erected on top of these founding principles, do you see, I mean, our big Occupy Wall Street protests were in large measure inspired by, huge social power awakening within Israel, which was also a reaction to the Arab Spring. So if that's true, do you see any kind of operating system like within Israel that might be able to provide some flexibility for that sort of rigid founding ideal of excluding others?
I think if it was ever there in Israel, and I think it's arguable that it never was there, but to the extent that there was this sort of at least rhetorical facade of commitment to liberal ideals, that's now being swept away. And you have even further retreat into openly segregationist and racist rhetoric and politics in Israel. And that's unmistakable. And the efforts in this country to hide it and claim that Israel is this haven of liberalism amongst the sea of savages and extremists just doesn't really wash when you actually look at what's going on in Israel. So I think it's not that, and I think the more important part of your question is there some kind of self-regulating mechanism in Israel that can create it? And I would say the answer to that is no. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't people in Israel who fervently would like to see this happen. What I'm saying is that they are not powerful enough or in a position to change the dynamic from within. And it's very important to recognize that, because it means that external solidarity is very, very important. As it was with South Africa, it was the external pressure that helped to put whites in a mindset where they thought, we really have to think about things differently. We're no longer immune. We can't just carry on because we're paying a price now. And I think it's very important that Israel get the same treatment. And the thing about BDS and boycott, divestment, and sanctions is nobody dies from it. It's yes, sir.
You talked about